In this video, what's the real cost of long distance EV travel when you're relying on public chargers? A lot of you have asked about this after my recent video where I had some trouble with my car at a public charger during a long journey. And it sparks quite a lot of debate really, because public rapid charging can be really expensive depending on the chargers that you use. And people make comparisons to petrol and diesel and stuff, but how much does it actually cost to travel long distance in an electric car? First up, I think we need to be clear. There is no cheaper, more convenient way to travel than by charging your car at home and then driving the distance within your car's range so that you'll return home and can charge there again, if that's an option that's available to you. Or, like I did during the winter range test video, drive a distance to where the battery is almost fully discharged when you arrive, but you know that you've got some cheap or free charging where you go, as like a workplace or other destination where you can plug in and you'll be fully charged again when you need to leave. Now, only you can decide what a suitable vehicle for that is going to look like. Range definitely comes at a premium. You should be able to find a vehicle where you'll be charging at home more often than anywhere else. That does come with a premium that could be in the thousands, right? I could have a car that could almost double the range that my MG has, but it would cost an awful lot more money. So it's a fine balancing act, and obviously your budget and what you're willing to spend, even if you can afford a more expensive car, is what's going to come into it, and that's going to be unique for everyone. So that'll take a bit of working out. But to give you an idea of just how cheap it can be to charge at home, I use Octopus Energy for my home energy supply. And they have a tariff called Octopus Go, which gives 4 hours every night for 5 pence per kilowatt hour. And that'll give you a per mile rate of as low as about 1.5 pence per mile, maybe even cheaper if you've got a fairly economical car. And I think that unless you've bypassed your meter or you're only charging where you can do so for free, you're not going to get much cheaper than that, are you? There's actually a referral link in the description for this video for Octopus Energy, so if you're interested in switching to them and you use that link, we'd both get £50 credit. You'll get one on your first bill and I'll get £50 credit on my account. And it's a great help to keep the wheels turning, so if you are interested, please do give it a go. On to the journey then. The route was Gloucester to Glasgow and back, 340 miles each way. And then another 95 miles of more local travel whilst in Scotland. 775 miles in total. I'd leave home with a fully charged battery, but that would be the last time I'd use a charger that I actually have control over. Public charging would be the order of the day the rest of the time. Now, before you unleash your pitchforks in the comments, this journey was made well in accordance with COVID-19 lockdown regulations, both in England and in Scotland, and there was a valid reason for my travel. So route planning then. ABRP, a Better Routeplanner, is a really good tool for planning longer journeys. It'll try to model your car's consumption, and you can put in other factors as well. You can customize it a lot to give you a decent real world itinerary. I found its default settings for the MG ZS a little bit pessimistic, but I was happy enough to use it as a framework. And what I found was then quite good was to use ZapMap to have a look at what's in the vicinity of the stops that it suggested and look at chargers that were maybe a little bit further away. And you could also then identify plan Bs should something go wrong, or go a little bit further away still if it turns out your consumption is better than it thought and you've got a lot more range, so you're not stopping too early. Stop number 1 then was in Knutsford. I stopped at Knutsford Services, but the only Ecotricity CCS charger there was in use. I'd stopped there to take a comfort break and grab some food anyway, so I didn't want to wait for the charger to become available, so went to an Osprey charger at a pub actually in Knutsford itself. The charge rate was decent. Averaged 43 kilowatts, all right the way up to 81%. And it was pulling the full 50 out of the charger, a 50 kilowatt charger at several points. Seems the warm battery from a long distance motorway journey gives you really good charging speeds with the ZS EV. And the efficiency for the first leg of the journey was good too, 3.7 miles per kilowatt hour. Quite a surprise, because I mean it was a fair bit warmer than the last long journey I did. But I was driving about 65 on the motorway this time rather than sort of religiously sticking at 60. So I think it did very well, 3.7 miles per kilowatt hour. Pretty pleased with that. The cost for this charge was £8.23. That's 31 pence per kilowatt hour using the Osprey app to activate the charge. A Better Routeplanner showed the next charge would need to be a bit of a splash and dash. You come into a bit of a charging desert in the Lake District if you're going up the M6. And all you have at a certain bit of it is Ecotricity. So didn't particularly want to rely on that to make it to Gretna. So I stopped at Lancaster Park and Ride. That was the recommended option. And it was only 65 miles away from Knutsford. But we'd get there, give it a quick splash and dash, and then on to Gretna. So stop 2 at Lancaster Park and Ride was a BP Pulse 50 kilowatt charger. First time I'd ever used one. Authenticated with my RFID card, as you saw in the Charge Your Car video. And it gave me a blazing fast charge, pulling pretty much bang on the full 50 kilowatt the whole way. About as close as I imagine we'd ever get. I took 15.6 kilowatt hours out of it. It only cost £2.34 with a subscription. It makes a huge difference, right? 15 pence per kilowatt hour. So it's the same kind of price as a slightly more expensive home energy tariff, if you ignore the £7.80 a month subscription. So that's all good. We're back on the road. And the third and final stop, I rolled into Gretna services and had to use IONITY. I tried the Ecotricity charger, but just like at Gloucester South, it failed to start. So IONITY it was. Everybody moans about IONITY. They've got the headline grabbing price, 69 pence per kilowatt hour. Yeah, it really is expensive. There's no getting away from that. It is what it is. But I'll tell you what though, when you've been on the road all day and you just tried to use a charger that failed and you need to finish your journey, who cares how much it costs? So in the absence of a subscription, if you've got like an Audi or a Porsche or something like that, you can have a monthly subscription with cheaper charging rate. I used my Octopus juice card to activate the charge here. 66 pence per kilowatt hour. And 26.71 kilowatt hours meant a hefty bill, £17.63. Octopus juice was really impressive though. It went straight onto my Octopus Energy account almost straight away. So I paid for that charge alongside my home electricity, which is pretty cool. Charge rate was alright. It was only alright though. It wasn't as fast as the BP Pulse charger at all. It was 40 kilowatt or so, but considering this was a 350 kilowatt charger, it wasn't that great. And the ergonomics of the charger was a bit awkward. It's clearly designed for side loading cars like the Taycan or e-tron, so it was a bit awkward with a front loader like the MG ZS. And I've got a picture here. You can see how bad my parking was to get it to work. But anyway, that was the final charging stop, so it was onwards to Glasgow. Now it's a little bit colder now, and the hilly A74 definitely seemed to have an impact on the consumption. I wish I'd reset the trip computer at each step so we could look at the efficiency here, but there was a marked increase in consumption. I rolled into the hotel car park with only about 14 miles left on the guessometer, and we covered a total of 346.3 miles with an average consumption of 3.4 miles per kilowatt hour. It's pretty respectable, but it definitely gone down a fair bit. The total journey time was 8 hours door to door. Now I've made this very journey many a time. It normally takes me about 7. That's including time for comfort breaks, time for some lunch or some dinner, depending on what time of day it is. So in the real world here, we've added an hour by having to charge the car en route from what it would normally take realistically in the real world. Moving away from what the journey planner, that took an hour longer than it normally takes in a petrol or diesel car. There was a Tesla destination charger in the hotel car park, 2 of them in fact. One of them with a red sign showing it was for Teslas only, fair enough. And one with a white sign showing it was for all electric vehicles. There was only one dedicated charging bay for these 2 chargers, which I thought was a bit weird. But it was better than nothing. A bit odd this Tesla destination charger though. I'm not quite sure what the score was with it. So I plugged it in, I did absolutely nothing. Come up saying connected but not charging in the car. And I thought I'd mixed up the 2, but the other one didn't work either. I thought maybe I picked the Tesla only one. Both of them had green lights on, everything looked fine. So I went back to the one that the white sign was actually above, but nothing. Locked the doors, unlocked the doors, tried the reset button on the back of the charger, nothing. Connected but not charging. So, I mean, I wasn't too worried because there was a ChargePlace Scotland rapid charger pretty close by. If I had to use it, that'd be all right. But sitting on a rapid the next morning with a stone cold battery would have been a slow, painful process. And it wasn't particularly high up my priority list. But As it turned out, as I was unloading the car, with the car still plugged into this Tesla charger, all of a sudden it burst into life and just started charging as normal, just like any other AC charger does. Fantastic. One less thing to worry about, and the battery was fully charged in the morning, 100%, happy days. Now, any other charging I needed while I was travelling around Scotland to do the stuff that I was there for, that was catered for by ChargePlace Scotland. Now, that is a network of mostly public funded chargers owned by local authorities in each area. Currently operated by Charge Your Car. I say currently because Swarco are actually taking over the contract very, very shortly. They'll be running the chargers instead. I only used a couple of destination chargers and one rapid, and they all worked perfectly well. No issues at all. I had access to a ChargePlace Scotland RFID card, so I could access the network that way, but I believe you can currently use the Charge Your Car app to start charges on it too. All of this charging was free of charge. The areas that I was in, the councils don't charge for you to use the chargers, but some areas are introducing charges, and I don't think they'll be free for much longer. All in all, I had a good experience. I did notice some poor behaviours. Plug-in hybrids using tethered AC on a rapid rather than the AC post right next to them. But I think that's just an education issue. Maybe it's a side effect of free charging, but maybe not. Maybe you'll get that anywhere. People need to be taught how to actually properly go about using these chargers, I guess. As I prepared for the homeward journey, I had some more trouble with the Tesla destination charger at the hotel. It failed to start no matter what I did. Tried all the same stuff, couldn't get it to work again. Not sure why. It worked fine the first time, if it was a bit dodgy. If it doesn't like the ZS EV, I don't know. Please let me know in the comments if you've got any experience with them. If you've got a non-Tesla and you've tried to use Tesla destination and you've had trouble or it's worked fine, or I'm genuinely interested to know what was going on there. So I had to use the rapid then to get charged enough for the journey home, but a stone cold battery that was charged to about 55%. It was a long, slow process. So you know, I got it to 80% on this rapid slowly but surely, and then plugged into the 7 kilowatt next to it and let it finish off. Got to the high 90s. That's enough for the next day for the journey home. That'll do. The weather was noticeably worse for the journey home. It was blowing a gale all day, it was raining, it was cold, it was the works. Everything you don't really want for a long distance EV journey, really. This would be quite a good time to talk about the ZS EV, I guess. We're a good 400 miles in. It's really well suited to these kind of long motorway journeys. If we leave aside the fact you need to plug it in, and you know, the fueling, we'll address that separately, right? But that's a given for any EV. And if you spend more money on a fancier one, then you might be able to increase the time between your stops because you've got a bigger battery. But the other stuff, right, the comfort levels, well beyond what I'd expect from a car at the lower end of the market. My fatigue levels after the long journey were far lower than normal, and I've done this, as I say, many times in many different vehicles of all shapes and sizes. Of course, the electric drivetrain goes a long way in that. The reduction in noise, vibration and the harshness, it certainly makes it less draining on you. And alright, the need to stop multiple times to charge and get out of the car and stretch your legs probably does make a difference as well. But all in all, very happy. The car performed very well. One minor criticism would be the lack of automatic climate control. I found that once you've been in the car for quite a long time, you had to make quite frequent adjustments to the temperature because you're driving between places where the outside temperature is different and stuff. But I guess it's just what you're used to. I've had a lot of vehicles with automatic climate controls, and I guess you then notice when you don't have it. You don't need to tell me it's a minor thing and I shouldn't worry about it. But the world's moved on since opening the window was the only air conditioning you needed, right? Anyway, back to the homeward journey. Stop number 1 was a BP Pulse Rapid just round the corner from Gretna Services, because I thought I would cheap out. I thought I'd avoid IONITY this time, and there was a plan B, right? So BP Pulse at a hotel in Gretna itself. It wasn't too bad. It was a little bit slower than the one at Lancaster, but it certainly did the job. Strangely, it kicked me off at 70-something%. It just stopped charging, but I restarted the charge and it was fine up to 80%. £4.31 later, we were back on the road. You can tell from that alone that the battery was a little bit lower than I expected by this point. The wind and rain were biting pretty hard. 2.6 miles per kilowatt hour for this first bit of the journey. And it would be a long old day if it kept that up, because that greatly reduces the range. Stop number 2, 75 miles later, was at a Booth supermarket in Kirkby, Lonsdale, which had a lovely bank of 4 InstaVolt chargers. I hadn't paid that much attention to ZapMap, and I was just expecting there to be 2, like most InstaVolt sites have 2. Some only have 1, but most have 2. But I was quite surprised that there was 4 just in a supermarket car park. Brilliant stuff. I started the charge here using my ChargePoint RFID card. You can use contactless, of course, at InstaVolt, but ChargePoint's quite good because you can see the charge progress in the app. So if you're away from the car, you can see how it's getting on. Quite handy if you don't have an app to monitor your car. And it keeps a log of what you spent, which is quite handy for things like this, where I want to keep track of costs. This charger was blazing fast. It was straight in at nearly the maximum 50 kilowatt. And it ramped right on at that up until 81%. As I find the drop off in this RSEV, or on my RSEV, bang on 81%. I had a nice lunch from the supermarket as well, so all in all, fairly pleasant stop. It was certainly better than a closed hotel car park. The economy was still pretty rubbish. Those 75 miles had taken me back down to well below 20%. This was going to be a battle today. Stop number 3, the now rather infamous MFG Crow Orchard. If you saw my video on that subject, you'll know that I had some issues here. Thankfully, through more luck than judgment and the use of a 10mm spanner, that didn't result in a trip on the big yellow taxi, but it quite easily could have. A couple of commenters said it was blatantly obvious that performing a hard reset of the 12-volt system would have sorted the problem. I do wonder how many average EV drivers would have that viewpoint. Not many, I reckon. Performing a hard reset of your vehicles, not in anybody's vocabulary, I don't think. Anyway, £9.88 was the fee at 39 pence per kilowatt hour. Took them quite a while to return the £30 pre-authorisations from the 2 failed charging attempts, £15 each. As I said before in a previous video about pre-auth, it's a real issue. It's a real issue across loads of charging networks. The 4th and final stop on the homeward straight was a surprising one. I was heading for an InstaVolt in Stafford, but I stopped at Stafford Services southbound for a comfort break. I thought, you know what, I'll give the battered old Ecotricity unit in the corner a go, just to see if it works. And it did. It just cracked on. To my absolute amazement, it started and worked fine. Pulled 40 kilowatts or so. All good, really, for these old DBT units. You can't really complain at that, I don't think. I mean, it wouldn't be electric highway without some problems. The app logged me out just as I went to stop the charge, and I had to call the helpline to get them to sort it. Fair enough, they answered the phone quickly, they were pleasant enough, and they sorted it out there and then. Can't say fairer than that, really. £6.39 saw us back on the way. Happy days. That was all of the charging. I'm finally home. 9 hours this time. A whole extra hour over the outbound journey. Not ideal at all. That's 2 hours longer than it would normally take. And apart from some pretty awful weather, it's not like there was traffic to blame or anything like that. Truly caused by the increased consumption because of the weather. Anyway, it's time to talk cash. How much did this little lot cost? I know the cost of public charging is a hot topic, so let's look at this real world example. I spent £8.23 with Osprey, £6.65 with BP, £17.63 with IONITY, £9.88 with MFG, £10.75 with InstaVolt, and £6.39 with Ecotricity. That's £59.53 in public charging. For the interest of completeness, it costs about £2 to fully charge at home using Octopus Go to return to a full charge. So we're back at where we started. If you think about it like a rental car, full to full, so back to a full battery. That would be £61.53 for 775 miles, 7.9 pence per mile. If I was driving a diesel car, I'd need to achieve 70.6 miles per gallon, assuming diesel's £1.23 per litre. I couldn't tell you how much it is. It's been that long since I bought any, but I think that's about right. I think £1.23, so 70.9 mile per gallon. Yeah. If I swapped out the charge at IONITY for that BP Pulse one at Gretna, the total would just have been £44.90. That'd be 5.8 pence per mile for the whole journey. But what I think that shows very well is that rather than worrying about the cost of an individual charger, there's no point really in getting caught up in how expensive one network is or another, or how it's outrageous what IONITY charge when you can charge at home for 5 pence. And obviously there's a new breed of smug people harping on about how they charge for free with solar power. Well, if you spent a few grand on solar and you only travel within your car's stated range, that's great. But back in the real world, if you're making real journeys, the average cost per mile is still so low that you don't really need to have a heart attack every time public charging is mentioned. It's not that bad. I hope that this video was useful. You can see for yourself the reality of making long EV journeys in the UK at the moment. I was most surprised at the difference the poor weather made. I wasn't quite expecting that. We talk about cold temperatures and stuff, but just really crap weather seemed to make quite a big difference. It does seem to be how it is. I think the cost per mile is certainly very reasonable, even using IONITY. I think it's fairly unrealistic because I know you're going to tell me, well, I've got a diesel and it does 800 miles to the gallon and it never needs filling up and it's brilliant. But a diesel SUV the size of the MG ZS EV isn't going to do 70 miles per gallon on the motorway. It just isn't. So it's still cheaper. Even using IONITY for part of the journey is still cheaper. So bear that in mind before you come at me talking about how cheap your diesel is. Thanks very much for watching. Please do let me know what you think. Has this put you off having an EV even more? Or has it made your eyes open a little bit? I'd be really interested to know what you think. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.